Not the biggest, not the most expensive, but the most unusual, and that's what makes it fascinating. One of the most distinctive and frequently searched aspects of Hearst Castle architecture is the fact that it was never truly finished. Unlike other famous American mansions such as Biltmore Estate or the Breakers, Hearst Castle was not built according to a fixed master plan with a clear beginning and end. Instead, it evolved continuously for nearly 3 decades, shaped by changing tastes, ambitions, and moods. This unfinished forever design is not a flaw. It is the core of what makes Hearst Castle unique. Construction began in 1919 and continued into the early 1940s. Yet even at its peak, Hearst considered the estate a work in progress. Rooms were redesigned, demolished, rebuilt, expanded or reimagined multiple times. Towers rose while others were halted mid-vision. Entire wings were planned but never constructed. The estate exists in a permanent state of becoming, which gives it a rare sense of movement and personality. From an architectural perspective, this makes Hearst Castle radically different from traditional Gilded Age mansions. Those estates aimed for symmetry, balance, and completion. Hearst Castle embraces asymmetry, experimentation, and contradiction. Spanish Revival towers coexist with Gothic elements, Renaissance facades, and Roman-inspired spaces, all layered rather than unified. This eclectic style is often described in searches as architectural collage, fantasy estate, or Mediterranean Revival mansion, but none fully capture the experience. The reason for this perpetual incompletion lies largely in William Randolph Hearst's creative process. Hearst was a compulsive collector and editor by nature. Just as he constantly revised newspapers and headlines, he treated the castle as an editable object. He would discover a European ceiling, a medieval fireplace, or a set of monastery doors, and then redesign a room around the object, even if that meant undoing years of previous work. Architecture followed acquisition, not the other way around. This approach also explains why Hearst Castle feels more like a living environment than a static monument. There is no single final version of the estate. Instead, visitors experience layers of intent: what was imagined, what was built, and what was interrupted by time, economics, or Hearst's shifting interests. The Great Depression, rising construction costs, and Hearst's declining health eventually slowed development, freezing the castle in a moment of suspended ambition. Interestingly, this unfinished quality enhances the emotional impact of the site. Many historians and architectural critics note that Hearst Castle feels more human than its contemporaries. It reveals doubt, excess, restlessness, and imagination all at once. Where completed mansions project authority and control, Hearst Castle exposes process and obsession. Today, this aspect is central to its identity as a historic landmark in California. The unfinished towers, unused foundations, and unrealized plans invite speculation and interpretation. They encourage visitors to imagine what might have been, and to recognize that the castle is not just a product of wealth, but of an ongoing creative struggle. In that sense, Hearst Castle is not unfinished because it failed. It is unfinished because it was never meant to stop becoming. To understand Hearst Castle, one must first understand William Randolph Hearst himself. More than any architectural style or historical era, the castle is a direct expression of Hearst's psychology, his ambitions, insecurities, contradictions, and desires. Frequently described in searches as a media tycoon, newspaper magnate, or Gilded Age billionaire, Hearst was also something far more complex. A man attempting to build permanence in a world he believed was always slipping away. Hearst was born into immense wealth, but unlike European aristocracy, American wealth came without centuries of inherited legitimacy. This created a psychological tension that shaped his life. Hearst Castle can be read as an attempt to compensate for that absence of lineage. By collecting ancient art, medieval architecture, and Renaissance fragments, Hearst wasn't decorating. He was manufacturing ancestry. The castle functioned as a physical argument that he belonged among kings, popes, and emperors. At the core of Hearst's psychology was control. As a newspaper publisher, he controlled narratives, headlines, and public opinion. At San Simeon, he controlled environment, experience, and time itself. Guests followed carefully structured schedules. Rooms were staged to evoke awe or intimacy. Even views were choreographed. The castle allowed Hearst to curate reality in ways that modern searches often associate with terms like power architecture, ego-driven design, and status symbolism. Yet control coexisted with deep restlessness. Hearst was famously indecisive, constantly revising plans, requesting changes, and reimagining spaces. This mirrors his editorial habits. Newspapers were never final. They were revised daily. The castle became an extension of that mindset, endlessly editable, never complete. Psychologically, this suggests a man uncomfortable with closure, always seeking the next acquisition, the next improvement, the next idea. There is also a strong element of nostalgia in Hearst's psychology. He idealized Europe, history, and a romanticized past he never truly belonged to. Many historians note that Hearst was not simply collecting art. He was collecting eras. In doing so, he insulated himself from modernity, even as he helped define it through mass media. Hearst Castle thus becomes a paradox, a modern structure pretending to be ancient, built by a man shaping the future while longing for the past. Another key psychological dimension is performance. Hearst understood spectacle better than almost anyone of his time. The castle was designed not just for private enjoyment, but for an audience: Hollywood stars, politicians, intellectuals, and power brokers. Entertaining was not casual, it was strategic. Hearst positioned himself at the center of cultural gravity, using hospitality as influence. Searches often connect this to elite social networks, celebrity culture, and soft power, all of which Hearst mastered decades before the term existed. Despite the grandeur, there is also evidence of loneliness. Hearst spent long periods isolated at the castle, surrounded by staff, art, and guests, but rarely equals. The scale of the estate dwarfs the individual, and some historians interpret this as revealing emotional distance rather than confidence. The castle overwhelms because Hearst himself feared being diminished by time, irrelevance, or loss of power. In the end, Hearst Castle is not merely a monument to wealth. It is a psychological landscape. Every tower, pool, and gallery reflects a man trying to anchor himself in history, command the present, and outpace the future. Hearst did not build a home. He built a mind you can walk through. Any serious discussion of Hearst Castle architecture is incomplete without recognizing Julia Morgan, the architect who transformed William Randolph Hearst's restless imagination into physical reality. Frequently searched as Julia Morgan Architect, Hearst Castle Architect, and first woman architect in California, Morgan was not simply an executor of Hearst's ideas. She was the structural intelligence that made the impossible possible. Julia Morgan was the first woman licensed as an architect in California, and one of the first women admitted to the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, the most prestigious architectural school of the era. Her training combined classical European design principles with cutting-edge engineering, making her uniquely suited to a project as ambitious and unstable as Hearst Castle. Where Hearst provided vision and obsession, Morgan provided discipline, precision, and resilience. The professional relationship between Hearst and Morgan lasted nearly 30 years, an extraordinary collaboration defined by constant revision. Hearst sent thousands of letters, sketches, and notes, sometimes changing his mind daily. Morgan translated these instructions into working drawings, recalculations, and revised plans without ego or complaint. This adaptability is one of the most remarkable aspects of her genius. She understood that Hearst Castle was not a conventional commission, but a living architectural experiment. Structurally, Morgan's role was critical. Hearst Castle sits on a mountaintop in an earthquake-prone region of California. Long before modern seismic codes, Morgan designed reinforced concrete frameworks hidden beneath stone facades, allowing the castle to survive earthquakes that would have destroyed a purely traditional masonry structure. This fusion of modern engineering and historical aesthetics is a defining feature of the estate, and a frequent subject in searches related to earthquake-resistant architecture and early reinforced concrete design. Morgan also mastered stylistic flexibility. Hearst demanded Spanish colonial revival towers inspired by cathedrals, Renaissance palaces modeled after Italian villas, Gothic motifs, Roman temples, and Mediterranean courtyards, all within a single estate. Rather than forcing stylistic unity, Morgan focused on proportional harmony. She ensured that scale, rhythm, and material transitions felt intentional, even when styles clashed. This is why Hearst Castle feels eclectic rather than chaotic. Equally important was Morgan's ability to work invisibly. Unlike many star architects, she did not seek credit or public recognition. For decades, Hearst Castle was attributed almost entirely to Hearst himself. Only later did historians fully acknowledge that Morgan was the intellectual and technical backbone of the project. Today, her role is central in discussions of women in architecture, architectural history, and Beaux-Arts influence in America. Morgan's sensitivity extended beyond structure to function. She designed service corridors, staff housing, kitchens, and infrastructure with the same care as ceremonial spaces. This allowed the estate to operate smoothly despite its scale and complexity. Her understanding of logistics ensured that Hearst's theatrical vision never collapsed under its own weight. In many ways, Julia Morgan was the stabilizing force behind Hearst Castle's excess. She gave permanence to impermanence, structure to obsession, and coherence to contradiction. Without her, Hearst Castle might have remained a fantasy. Because of her, it became a landmark. Hearst imagined the dream. Julia Morgan made it stand. Few features of Hearst Castle are as globally recognizable, or as revealing, as the Neptune Pool. Often searched as Hearst Castle Neptune Pool, Roman-style pool, and iconic swimming pool in the USA, this outdoor masterpiece is not merely a luxury amenity. It is a symbol of obsession, perfectionism, and architectural theater. And it encapsulates William Randolph Hearst's mindset better than almost any other element of the estate. Construction of the Neptune Pool began in the early 1920s. But what makes it extraordinary is not when it was built, it's how many times it was rebuilt. Hearst was never satisfied. Over the course of more than a decade, the pool was redesigned and reconstructed at least 3 major times, each version more elaborate than the last. This relentless revision transformed a simple swimming pool into a monumental stage set, inspired by ancient Roman baths and classical temples. The final version of the Neptune Pool is framed by marble colonnades, classical sculptures, and temple-like pavilions overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The pool appears to float between sky and sea, deliberately blurring the boundary between nature and architecture. Hearst insisted on imported marble and classical statuary, reinforcing the illusion that this was not a modern estate, but a relic of antiquity. Search terms such as Roman Revival architecture, classical pool design, and luxury outdoor pools are often used to describe it, but none fully capture its theatrical intent. Hearst's obsession with the Neptune Pool reveals several key psychological and cultural motivations. First, it reflects his fixation on perfection. Even after the pool was fully functional, Hearst demanded changes to proportions, materials, and ornamentation. A column might be moved inches, a sculpture replaced, a facade reimagined. The pool was not built for efficiency or cost. It was built to satisfy an ideal that existed only in Hearst's mind. Second, the Neptune Pool functioned as a social stage. Guests did not merely swim, they were seen swimming. Hollywood actors, politicians, and journalists gathered there under the California sun, framed by architecture that suggested imperial grandeur. In this setting, leisure became performance. The pool reinforced Hearst's role as host, patron, and cultural authority. It is frequently referenced in discussions of celebrity culture, elite leisure, and status architecture during Hollywood's golden age. The Neptune Pool also illustrates Hearst's rejection of modernism. At a time when architectural trends were moving toward minimalism and functional design, Hearst doubled down on ornament, myth, and historical reference. The pool's classical imagery, gods, heroes, symmetry, connects directly to his desire to align himself with the timeless authority of ancient civilizations. From an engineering standpoint, the Neptune Pool was also a technical achievement. Hidden beneath its classical surface are modern plumbing systems, reinforced concrete, and structural supports designed by Julia Morgan. This fusion of modern engineering and ancient appearance is central to Hearst Castle's identity and often highlighted in architectural analysis. Today, the Neptune Pool remains one of the most photographed and studied elements of Hearst Castle. Its long restoration history and recent reopening have only deepened public fascination. More than a swimming pool, it stands as evidence that Hearst was not interested in completion, only in pursuit. The Neptune Pool was never about water. It was about achieving the impossible illusion of perfection. Hidden beneath Hearst Castle's terraces lies one of its most mesmerizing spaces, the Roman Pool. Often searched as Hearst Castle Roman Pool, Indoor Mosaic Pool, and Ancient Roman Bath-inspired design, this subterranean chamber is widely regarded as one of the most beautiful indoor swimming pools in the world. Unlike the dramatic openness of the Neptune Pool, the Roman Pool captivates through intimacy, illusion, and atmosphere. The Roman Pool was inspired by ancient Roman bathhouses, particularly those of Pompeii and Rome. Its design intentionally avoids any visual reference to the 20th century. Walls, ceilings, and columns are completely covered in intricate glass mosaic tiles, dominated by deep blues, golds, and rich geometric patterns. The effect is immersive. Once inside, it feels as though time has been suspended. There are no visible windows, clocks, or modern details to anchor the visitor to a specific era. This illusion of timelessness was deliberate. William Randolph Hearst wanted the Roman Pool to feel eternal, as if it had always existed. Unlike many luxury features meant to impress at first glance, this space was designed to envelop the senses slowly. The low light reflects off the water and mosaics, creating a shimmering environment that feels sacred rather than recreational. Searches frequently associate the Roman Pool with terms like ancient spa architecture, classical interiors, and luxury wellness spaces, but its emotional impact goes far beyond luxury. The mosaics themselves are a technical and artistic triumph. Made from millions of hand-set glass tiles, many containing real gold leaf, they form classical patterns drawn from archaeological sources. The craftsmanship required was extraordinary, and the materials were among the most expensive used anywhere on the estate. Unlike imported European artifacts elsewhere in the castle, the Roman Pool was entirely constructed in America, yet it rivals ancient precedents in detail and atmosphere. Psychologically, the Roman Pool represents Hearst's desire for retreat and control. While the Neptune Pool is extroverted and theatrical, the Roman Pool is introverted and introspective. It was used at night privately and often without guests. This contrast mirrors Hearst's public persona as a powerful media figure and his private inclination toward isolation and reflection. In this sense, the Roman Pool is one of the most revealing spaces in the entire estate. From an architectural perspective, the pool also demonstrates Julia Morgan's mastery of structure and illusion. Beneath the mosaics lies reinforced concrete, waterproofing systems, and carefully engineered acoustics that amplify the stillness of the space. The pool was designed not just to be seen, but to be felt, quiet, enclosed, and meditative. Modern searches often highlight it in discussions of immersive architecture and experiential design, long before such concepts were widely named. Unlike many historic interiors that feel fragile or outdated, the Roman Pool feels contemporary in its emotional resonance. Its focus on sensory immersion aligns closely with modern wellness architecture, despite being built nearly a century ago. This paradox, ancient in appearance, modern in experience, is the essence of its timelessness. The Roman Pool does not announce itself. It absorbs you and refuses to let you know what century you're in. One of the most searched and discussed aspects of Hearst Castle is its extraordinary use of imported European architecture, often described with terms like European antiques, medieval ceilings, Renaissance fireplaces, and historic architectural fragments. The estate is less a single building than a curated collection of old-world structures, embedded into a New World setting. This approach sets Hearst Castle apart from every other American mansion of its era. William Randolph Hearst did not simply imitate European styles. He physically transported Europe to California. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Hearst acquired thousands of architectural elements from Spain, Italy, France, and beyond. These included monastery cloisters, cathedral ceilings, carved doors, stone arches, Gothic choir stalls, and entire room-scale components. Many of these pieces dated back to the Middle Ages and Renaissance, carrying centuries of history before arriving at San Simeon. This practice was driven by Hearst's belief that authenticity mattered. Replicas were not enough. He wanted original materials with visible age, wear, and craftsmanship. In doing so, he transformed Hearst Castle into what many scholars describe as a three-dimensional museum of European architecture. Searches often link this feature to historic preservation, architectural salvage, and old-world craftsmanship, though the scale of Hearst's collecting was unprecedented. The integration of these elements was not straightforward. European architectural fragments were designed for entirely different climates, building methods, and proportions. Julia Morgan faced the immense challenge of adapting them to modern structural systems while preserving their visual integrity. Ancient wooden ceilings were mounted onto reinforced concrete frameworks. Stone portals were resized or recontextualized. The result is a seamless illusion. Visitors often assume these elements were built on site, unaware they were shipped across the Atlantic. Culturally, this imported architecture reflects Hearst's complicated relationship with Europe. He admired European aristocracy, tradition, and artistic heritage, yet he also sought to surpass it. By assembling fragments from different regions and centuries into one estate, Hearst created something Europe itself never had, a compressed, idealized version of its own past. In that sense, Hearst Castle is not European. It is America's interpretation of Europe, filtered through ambition and wealth. This practice also raises ethical and historical questions that are frequently discussed today. Some architectural historians critique Hearst for removing cultural heritage from its original context. Others argue that his acquisitions preserved artifacts that might otherwise have been lost to neglect or destruction. These debates appear frequently in searches related to cultural heritage ethics, art collecting controversies, and architectural repurposing. Visually, the impact is undeniable. Walking through Hearst Castle means passing from a Spanish cathedral ceiling to an Italian Renaissance hall, then into a Gothic-inspired dining room, all without leaving the building. This layered experience reinforces the sense that the castle exists outside normal geography and time. Imported European architecture gave Hearst Castle its authority. It anchored a modern American estate in centuries of history, whether borrowed, purchased, or reimagined. More than decoration, these elements served as proof of taste, power, and the ability to command the past itself. Hearst didn't travel through Europe. He rebuilt it piece by piece on a California hill. During the 1920s and 1930s, Hearst Castle was not merely a private estate. It was one of the most powerful social engines of Hollywood's golden age. Frequently searched as Hearst Castle Hollywood, celebrity guests at Hearst Castle, and golden age of Hollywood estates, San Simeon functioned as a carefully curated meeting ground where entertainment, politics, media, and wealth intersected. William Randolph Hearst understood something few others did at the time. Social power could be engineered. By inviting the right combination of movie stars, directors, politicians, intellectuals, and business leaders, he transformed his home into a cultural crossroads. Guests included Charlie Chaplin, Greta Garbo, Clark Gable, Cary Grant, Joan Crawford, Winston Churchill, and countless others who shaped 20th century public life. To be invited to Hearst Castle was to be validated. The estate's design reinforced this role. Large public rooms encouraged group interaction, while terraces, pools, and gardens created informal spaces for conversation. Days were structured around shared activities: swimming at the Neptune Pool, horseback riding, tennis, formal dinners, and evening film screenings. Hearst controlled not just the guest list, but the rhythm of social life, ensuring that influence and relationships developed naturally under his supervision. Hearst Castle also served as a bridge between old power and new fame. At a time when Hollywood celebrities were still viewed with skepticism by traditional elites, Hearst elevated them by hosting them alongside politicians, diplomats, and industrialists. In return, Hollywood amplified Hearst's cultural relevance. This mutual reinforcement helped solidify celebrity culture as a legitimate social force. a concept now central to discussions of media influence, soft power, and elite networking. The presence of Marion Davies, Hearst's longtime companion and a major film star, further strengthened the castle's role in Hollywood society. Davies acted as social glue, warm, humorous, and widely liked, balancing Hearst's intensity. Her involvement softened the environment and made the estate feel less like a fortress and more like a glamorous retreat. Searches related to Marion Davies' Hearst Castle often highlight her role in shaping its social atmosphere. Importantly, these gatherings were not chaotic parties. They were highly choreographed experiences. Guests were assigned rooms, given schedules, and subtly guided through activities. Even seating at dinner was intentional. This level of control allowed Hearst to observe, influence, and connect people without appearing overtly manipulative. The castle became a space where alliances formed organically, but under Hearst's watchful eye. Film screenings were especially significant. Hearst Castle featured a private movie theater where guests previewed films, discussed ideas, and absorbed the power of cinema as a cultural tool. Hearst recognized film's ability to shape public opinion, much as newspapers did. Hosting Hollywood at San Simeon allowed him to remain at the center of that influence. By the late 1930s, economic pressures and changing social norms reduced the scale of these gatherings, but their impact endured. Hearst Castle had already cemented its reputation as a symbol of elite American culture at its most influential moment. Hearst Castle didn't just host Hollywood. It helped define what Hollywood and celebrity itself would become. At Hearst Castle, guests did not simply visit, they performed. Often searched as Hearst Castle Guest Experience, Life at Hearst Castle, and San Simeon Social Rituals, the estate functioned as a carefully staged environment where every movement, interaction, and moment was subtly directed. William Randolph Hearst treated hospitality not as casual entertainment, but as a form of theater, with himself as director and the castle as the stage. From the moment guests arrived at San Simeon, the experience was choreographed. The long ascent to the hilltop estate created anticipation and psychological separation from the outside world. Upon arrival, guests were welcomed into a universe governed by Hearst's rules. Personal schedules were prepared for each visitor, detailing daily activities such as swimming, horseback riding, tennis, formal dinners, and evening film screenings. This structure eliminated uncertainty and ensured constant engagement. Rooms were assigned strategically. Guest accommodations, known as casitas, were deliberately modest compared to the main house. This reinforced hierarchy while maintaining comfort. The contrast heightened the impact of shared spaces like the dining room, terraces, and pools, where guests gathered as an audience to the spectacle of the estate itself. Searches often link this design to power dynamics in architecture and social hierarchy in elite estates. Conversation, too, was curated. Hearst often dined separately, arriving later to listen rather than speak, observing interactions like a conductor evaluating an orchestra. Seating arrangements were calculated to encourage specific exchanges. Politicians sat near media figures, actors near writers, newcomers near established guests. The environment encouraged connection, but always within boundaries Hearst controlled. Even leisure had dramatic intent. Swimming at the Neptune Pool, walking through the gardens, or lounging on terraces was never purely private. These activities were visual performances set against monumental architecture and natural vistas. Guests became living figures within a carefully composed scene, a concept that aligns with modern discussions of experiential design and immersive environments. Theater extended into the evenings. After formal dinners, guests gathered for film screenings in the private theater, reinforcing Hearst's identity as both media mogul and cultural gatekeeper. Films were discussed, critiqued, and contextualized, blending entertainment with intellectual authority. In this way, Hearst Castle functioned as both salon and stage. This theatrical approach served multiple purposes. It reinforced Hearst's dominance without overt force, created memorable experiences that guests would discuss long after leaving, and ensured that every visit strengthened his social influence. Importantly, it also protected Hearst emotionally. By controlling the environment, he limited unpredictability and exposure. What makes this aspect of Hearst Castle especially fascinating is how modern it feels. Today, luxury brands, resorts, and even social media experiences rely on similar principles: curated journeys, controlled narratives, and performative spaces. Hearst anticipated this decades earlier. At Hearst Castle, nothing was accidental. Guests didn't just stay, they stepped into a role. One of the most distinctive and often searched aspects of Hearst Castle is its complex relationship with nature. Frequently described using terms like Hearst Castle landscape, San Simeon coastline, and California hilltop estate, the castle is neither fully integrated into nature nor completely separate from it. Instead, it exists in a state of deliberate tension, simultaneously dominating the landscape and romanticizing it. Hearst Castle sits atop La Cuesta Encantada, the Enchanted Hill, a commanding position overlooking the Pacific Ocean, rolling hills, and vast open land. The choice of location was intentional. From the very beginning, Hearst wanted height, distance, and visibility. Elevation symbolized authority. The castle was meant to be seen from afar, rising above the coastline like a mythic presence. In this sense, nature becomes a backdrop, a vast theatrical set framing human ambition. Yet Hearst did not want to erase nature. Instead, he curated it. The surrounding landscape was carefully shaped to feel both wild and controlled. Winding roads, long sightlines, and formal gardens were designed to heighten anticipation and drama. Visitors experienced nature as a process of arrival, not an untouched environment. This approach aligns with searches related to designed landscapes, estate planning, and landscape architecture in historic mansions. The gardens themselves reflect this duality. Near the castle, European-inspired terraces and formal plantings reinforce architectural order. As one moves outward, the landscape becomes increasingly natural. Grasses, hills, and open spaces blending into the California countryside. This gradient creates the illusion that the castle emerges organically from the land, even though it clearly imposes itself upon it. The Pacific Ocean plays a crucial symbolic role. Many rooms and terraces are oriented toward ocean views, reinforcing themes of infinity, power, and isolation. The sea becomes both a visual escape and a reminder of distance, from cities, from modern life, and from social constraints. Searches often connect this feature to coastal luxury estates and ocean view architecture. But at Hearst Castle, the ocean also serves a psychological function. It reinforces separation and control. Wildlife further complicates this relationship. Deer, birds, and later exotic animals moved freely across the estate, creating a surreal coexistence between architecture and living landscape. Rather than fencing nature out, Hearst allowed it to pass through his domain on his terms. This blending of wild and curated environments contributes to the castle's dreamlike quality. Importantly, the relationship with nature also reflects Hearst's inner contradictions. He sought isolation yet required spectacle. He wanted privacy but demanded visibility. Nature provided both concealment and stagecraft. The hilltop setting allowed Hearst to withdraw from the world while still asserting dominance over it. Today, this balance between monument and environment is a key reason Hearst Castle feels timeless rather than dated. Modern visitors often describe the experience as cinematic, spiritual, or unreal, responses directly tied to how the estate interacts with its surroundings. Hearst Castle does not blend into nature. It negotiates with it, boldly, endlessly, and on its own terms. One of the most unexpected and frequently searched aspects of Hearst Castle is the existence of a private zoo. Often referenced as Hearst Castle Zoo, exotic animals at San Simeon, and zebras at Hearst Castle, this feature adds a surreal layer to the estate's identity. Few American mansions ever included a zoo, and none used it as symbolically as William Randolph Hearst did. At its height in the 1920s and 1930s, the Hearst Castle Zoo housed an extraordinary collection of exotic animals from around the world. Zebras, giraffes, camels, antelope, lions, tigers, bears, and even elephants roamed designated areas of the estate. For guests arriving at San Simeon, the sight of wild animals grazing against a backdrop of rolling California hills and ocean views was unforgettable. It reinforced the sense that they had entered a world detached from normal reality. The zoo served multiple purposes. On the surface, it was entertainment, a novelty that amazed guests and elevated Hearst Castle beyond traditional luxury estates. But at a deeper level, it symbolized global reach and ownership. Exotic animals represented distant lands, exploration, and power over nature. In an era before mass international travel, possessing such creatures conveyed a sense of worldliness and dominance, often associated in searches with imperial-era collecting and status symbolism. Psychologically, the zoo aligns closely with Hearst's broader collecting impulse. Just as he amassed art, architecture, and historical artifacts, he collected living beings that embodied rarity and spectacle. The animals were not random. They were chosen for visual impact and symbolic value. Zebras, in particular, became a visual signature. Their striking appearance turned the surrounding hills into a living illustration of Hearst's ability to bend the improbable into existence. From a logistical standpoint, maintaining the zoo was a massive undertaking. Specialized staff, food supplies, veterinary care, and enclosures were required, all managed alongside the already complex operations of the estate. This reinforces the idea that Hearst Castle functioned less like a home and more like a self-contained domain, capable of sustaining both human and animal populations. Over time, changing attitudes toward animal welfare and rising costs led to the gradual dismantling of the zoo. Many animals were relocated to accredited zoos, including the San Diego Zoo. However, zebras remain on the land today, descendants of the original herd. Their continued presence has become one of the castle's most charming and eerie features, an echo of past excess, still roaming freely. Culturally, the zoo contributes to the mythic quality of Hearst Castle. It blurs the boundary between estate and fantasy realm. Visitors are often surprised to encounter wildlife where they expect manicured lawns, reinforcing the idea that Hearst Castle exists outside conventional categories of architecture or lifestyle. The private zoo was not about animals alone. It was about extending imagination beyond walls and letting it walk the hills. Hearst Castle holds a unique place in the history of cinema, often searched as Hearst Castle film influence, Citizen Kane inspiration, and Hollywood filming locations. Its influence on film is not limited to appearances on screen. It helped shape how power, wealth, and isolation are visually represented in American cinema. No other private estate has had such a lasting impact on the language of film. The most famous cinematic connection is Citizen Kane, 1941, directed by Orson Welles. The fictional estate of Xanadu, home to Charles Foster Kane, is widely understood as being inspired by Hearst Castle. While the film is not a literal portrayal, its themes, unchecked ambition, obsession with legacy, and emotional isolation, mirror public perceptions of William Randolph Hearst. The visual idea of a vast labyrinthine estate filled with art, animals, and echoes of loneliness can be traced directly to San Simeon. Hearst Castle influenced cinema even before Citizen Kane. During Hollywood's golden age, filmmakers, actors, and studio executives visited the estate regularly. These guests absorbed the castle's dramatic use of scale, light, and setting. Monumental staircases, long corridors, silhouetted towers, and framed ocean views found their way into film set designs. Searches often connect Hearst Castle to cinematic architecture, visual storytelling, and set design inspiration. The estate's relationship with cinema was also technological and cultural. Hearst was deeply aware of film's power to shape public opinion, just as newspapers did. The castle's private movie theater became a space where films were screened, discussed, and evaluated among influential audiences. This blurred the line between leisure and media strategy, reinforcing Hearst's role as a gatekeeper of mass culture. Architecturally, Hearst Castle feels cinematic because it was designed with visual impact in mind. Sightlines are dramatic, spaces are revealed gradually, and transitions are theatrical. This aligns closely with film glamour, establishing shots, reveals, and controlled pacing. Modern directors and cinematographers often cite such estates as influences when creating fictional palaces, billionaire compounds, or mysterious estates. Beyond Citizen Kane, Hearst Castle has appeared in or inspired numerous films, television series, documentaries, and visual media. Even when not directly referenced, its DNA appears in fictional mega-estates portrayed as symbols of ultimate wealth or power. The castle has become a visual shorthand for excess, authority, and myth. Ironically, Hearst himself tried to suppress Citizen Kane, recognizing how powerfully the film reframed his public image. This only deepened the castle's cinematic legacy. The attempt to control narrative failed, proving the very point the film made. Once an image exists, it takes on a life of its own. Today, Hearst Castle continues to influence visual culture. Drone shots, panoramic reveals, and architectural storytelling owe much to the visual principles embodied at San Simeon long before cinema matured. Hearst Castle didn't just inspire a film. It helped teach cinema how to see power. One of the most underestimated aspects of Hearst Castle is its hidden technology. Often searched as Hearst Castle technology, modern systems in historic mansions, and early 20th century luxury engineering, the estate appears ancient and timeless on the surface. But beneath that illusion lies a sophisticated network of modern infrastructure. Hearst Castle was not only a fantasy of the past, it was a technological powerhouse of its era. William Randolph Hearst demanded that his castle feel old, but function better than any modern home. To achieve this, Julia Morgan integrated advanced systems that were largely invisible to guests. Reinforced concrete formed the structural backbone of the estate, allowing for earthquake resistance while supporting heavy stone facades and imported European architectural elements. This was cutting-edge engineering at a time when many buildings still relied on traditional masonry. Electricity was another key feature. Hearst Castle had its own power generation and electrical systems, ensuring reliable lighting long before rural California was fully electrified. Lighting was carefully concealed behind moldings, fixtures, and architectural details so that rooms glowed softly rather than appearing mechanically lit. This subtlety enhanced the illusion of antiquity while providing modern comfort. Plumbing and water management were equally advanced. The Neptune Pool and Roman Pool required complex filtration, heating, and circulation systems far ahead of typical residential standards. Bathrooms throughout the estate featured modern fixtures, hot water on demand, and efficient drainage, luxuries at the time. Searches related to luxury plumbing history and early indoor pools often reference Hearst Castle for this reason. Heating systems were also carefully hidden. Rather than relying on visible radiators, Morgan designed integrated heating solutions that preserved the visual integrity of historic interiors. Fireplaces, many imported from Europe, were functional but supplemented by modern systems to ensure comfort across the massive estate. Communication technology played a quiet but crucial role. The castle used internal telephone systems, call buttons for staff, and service corridors that allowed operations to run smoothly without disrupting guest experiences. Food, laundry, and supplies moved through hidden routes, reinforcing the theatrical illusion that luxury happened effortlessly. Perhaps most impressive is how seamlessly technology and aesthetics were blended. Unlike many modern retrofits, Hearst Castle was designed from the start to conceal its systems. This foresight is why the estate still feels immersive rather than museum-like. Modern searches often associate this with integrated design, invisible engineering, and smart planning before smart homes existed. The presence of advanced technology also reflects Hearst's dual identity. He romanticized the past but embraced modern power. As a media magnate, he depended on speed, communication, and infrastructure. The castle allowed him to live inside history without surrendering control or efficiency. Hearst Castle proves that innovation does not require visibility. The most powerful technology is the kind you never notice until it's gone. Hearst Castle has transcended its physical form to become an American myth. Often searched as Hearst Castle symbolism, American wealth and power, and myth of the American dream, the estate represents far more than a historic mansion. It stands as a cultural story about ambition, excess, creativity, and contradiction, one that continues to resonate long after William Randolph Hearst's era has passed. At its core, Hearst Castle embodies a uniquely American paradox. Unlike European palaces built over generations by monarchies, Hearst Castle was created within a single lifetime. It reflects the American belief that anything can be achieved through wealth, willpower, and imagination. Yet it also exposes the limits of that belief. The castle is vast, beautiful, and awe-inspiring, but it is also unfinished, isolating, and ultimately unsustainable as a private dream. This tension places Hearst Castle at the center of conversations about the American dream. It represents success taken to its extreme, where abundance no longer guarantees fulfillment. Search terms related to excessive wealth, Gilded Age legacy, and power and loneliness frequently intersect with discussions of the castle. In this way, Hearst Castle functions as both aspiration and cautionary tale. The myth is reinforced by popular culture. Through Citizen Kane and countless documentaries, photographs, and references, Hearst Castle has become shorthand for ultimate wealth and personal empire. Even those who have never visited understand its symbolic role. It stands for the idea that power can build worlds, but cannot always give them meaning. Hearst Castle also reflects America's complicated relationship with history. The estate borrows heavily from European tradition, while asserting American dominance over it. By assembling fragments of Old World architecture into a New World setting, Hearst created a narrative in which America not only inherits history, but reorganizes it. This act of cultural remixing is deeply American and central to the castle's mythic status. Importantly, the castle's survival as a public landmark transformed its meaning. No longer a private domain, it became a shared cultural artifact. Visitors do not encounter Hearst's world as guests, but as observers, free to interpret rather than perform. This shift from private power to public memory strengthens the myth rather than diminishing it. Today, Hearst Castle endures because it asks timeless questions. How much is enough? Can ambition ever be satisfied? What remains after power fades? As an American myth, Hearst Castle is not about answers. It is about the scale of the question and the courage to build it anyway.